Hey guys, welcome to the Perfectly Wasted Podcast. I'm the host, DullOxide. Today's episode 28 on Guardians of the Galaxy 2. You can find all my previous episodes on the Drinking Wisemen YouTube channel, along with my bi-weekly podcast, Brew the Truth, all my day-to-day photos and cosplay photos on my Instagram, at DullOxide. I kind of have run out of things to talk on recently, so I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the new Guardians of the Galaxy movie that came out. If you haven't seen the movie yet, it was pretty enjoyable. I liked it about as much as I liked the first movie. I'd say that it's either a 7 or an 8 out of 10 in my opinion. That's just my own personal scale. It wasn't super fantastic. It wasn't super bad or anything like that. There were parts inside of this movie that I liked more than the previous movie. But that being said, if you haven't seen it, you should probably check it out. Definitely, if you haven't seen it and you're watching this, don't watch this because I'm probably going to spoil some stuff for you. So that being said, what could possibly be spoiled? So they go into a little bit of Peter's backstory inside of this one, so you learn a little bit more about Star-Lord. I feel like some of it is definitely matching up a little bit with the comics, but a lot of it is just kind of the movie universe by itself. You know how they just like to make up their own story because it's the movie universe, so why not? And there were some aspects of it that I kind of didn't agree with. Some of the things I'll go ahead and I'll mention would be like, I felt like Drax was primarily inside of the movie for comedy, and that was it. Like, he didn't really see a whole lot of action, although there wasn't a ton of fighting, I guess you would say, compared to the first movie. The majority of the fighting was being done by Rocket the entire time. So Rocket was, in my opinion, in the most fight scenes, and Drax was the most comedic of everyone, and, Gamora and Peter, they were just kind of like there. Baby Groot was definitely some part of the comedy, but he just kind of was like there just to be silly, basically, and I kind of don't really like how they just had him places. Like, he obviously would have died by now if this is how he acts all the time, so I really didn't understand why they just made him so much of like a little fool, but, I mean, I guess it's okay, people seem to like it. So there was a lot of Yondu in this one, and a little bit of his backstory in there, and like I said, there was a lot of Rocket, actually, and Rocket's backstory, and you learned a little bit more about Peter, and something that I kind of was curious about is, I don't really follow the comics, but I did some research after watching the movie, and, Ego, as he is inside of the movie, isn't actually Peter's father inside of the comic book. So Peter's father is actually a guy by the name of Jason. He's the Prince of Krypton, and he goes by the alias of Jason of Sparnax. Him being the Prince of Krypton is actually somewhat important in the movie universe because his father is Esson. Alright, so Esson, being the king of the planet and Jason's father, was actually a Celestial. And he went by Esson the Searcher. So Esson's actually been to Earth before, and that's why it's kind of like of some importance. So if we were to go through and kind of apply this to the movie, where you see Ego claiming to be Peter's father, and he mentions himself, I'm a god, a celestial, things like this, then it kind of gives you a little bit of a weird idea. So there's a couple of things that kind of threw me through this. Now, I thought that there was the potential that Ego might just be lying to Peter about being his father, but they kind of encouraged a lot of the storyline by saying that, Ego knew a lot about his mother. So by him knowing a lot about Peter's mother, that kind of throws that theory out of the window that it's possible that he could not be his father. I had initially thought that maybe, Jason was actually his father, and, that the celestial blood came from Essen. And if that was the case, then Peter would be part celestial, and therefore it would still meet the movie purposes, but not be the actual storyline. It'd be closer to the actual comic book storyline. So that being the case, there was just too many inconsistencies with the way that his mother died and the way that the Ego admits to putting the tumor into his mother's brain to kill her and so on. But, if Ego had learned at some point that Jason had given birth with a woman from Earth, then that would make sense. But the whole planting the seed and everything like that, it doesn't really add up. So I think that they kind of wanted to keep it all inclusive inside of this movie with who the father is, so that it could be better for the cinematic universe, and kind of just push aside the comic book universe's story. The one thing that didn't really rub me quite the right way was when Ego dies at the end of the movie, I just kind of didn't agree with Peter losing his powers. The way that they kind of explained that away inside of the movie was that, oh, well, it's because he's getting his power from Ego, and that's why. But that can't really be true. And the reason that I kind of feel like that is because Ego states himself that when he found out there was a human that was able to hold an Infinity Stone and not die, that he knew that he had to have been his son. And that being said, Peter holding the Infinity Stone, the way that they played it off in the first movie, was that they all were combined holding and taking the burden of the stone. But that being said, at that time that he held the stone, if a normal human would have just perished immediately, and he didn't, then he must have some power of the Celestials or some power of God. And if that's the case, then after Ego dies, then there's absolutely no reason that that power would be gone, because it's not the same as, Galactus giving power to Silver Surfer and then taking it away. It's not on the same level. The power wasn't given to Peter. Peter was born with the power, which makes it just that much more powerful. So Peter isn't the same as someone like Silver Surfer, who has a cosmic glaze that was given to him by Galactus, okay? Peter was born with this power. And that being said, there's no reason that when Ego died, he should have all of a sudden lost his power. Now, I guess you could argue that the only reason he had the power in the first place was because he was on Ego, and he was just siphoning that power off. But that kind of also leads into another question, and that question being, does that mean that maybe Peter just has the ability to siphon power off of more powerful things or beings, in which case, if he comes into contact with, Galactus or another Infinity Stone, is he going to be able just to handle that because that's just the way his blood works, being part Celestial, or part God in this case? So it kind of leaves a lot of different questions going in there. I did really enjoy kind of the dynamic that was going through the movie, and the whole sisters fighting, and you kind of seeing that they are just crazy girls basically throughout the movie was kind of humorous to me. And at the same time, the way that they were raised kind of makes it even more so of a weird dynamic, how they just wanted to be sisters or be friends kind of. So that was kind of interesting, and I do like now that they're doing the extra shorts at the credits, so that it makes people want to stay longer and see the people that were involved in the credits, which is a really big deal. I always now stay through all of the credits for all Marvel movies. I don't usually read through all of them, but I do kind of glance at them and check out the names sometimes, because it is really cool to have your name up there. It's a pretty big deal, and with as many people as work on these films as currently do, then it's kind of like paying respect to them. So the fact that Marvel has thought of a way to get people to sit through it and look at the names at least and recognize people is kind of really cool of them to do. And since they're kind of the ones that pioneered this, that was pretty interesting. Something else that I really enjoyed was when you saw Stan Lee talking to the Watchers. Now that I thought was a really cool little thing, and I don't know if anyone else kind of has the same take on this as I do, but I kind of got the feeling that him on that planet talking to them was supposed to be him as himself, as the creator. Okay, so I thought that was supposed to be him as Stan Lee, not as somebody that was just inside of the movie, making a cameo. And the reason I think this is because when they showed him, he spoke of one of the cameos that he did. He says, "And another time, I was a delivery man." And that was kind of interesting to me because of the context that he put on it, "and another time." So that kind of leads me to believe that he's playing himself in the movie, talking to the Watchers in the aspect of yeah, I'm the creator, and this is how I've kind of incorporated myself inside of these movies, and this is why I did it, to try and make it so that hey, I've got a character inside of these movies too, and I'm part of the universe, and they're kind of going to him just to hear his story kind of thing. So I kind of liked that. I thought it was really an interesting thing. That being said, there were a lot of questions that I had about the movie and a lot of things that I felt were unanswered, but it overall was a pretty decent movie. Like I said, I'd give it a 7 or 8 out of 10. I definitely would see it again. I don't know if I'd see it again in theaters, but it was quite enjoyable. So, if you've gotten this far in the movie, thanks again for watching, as always. I appreciate it. Please do like, subscribe, and share. And again, that was 10 minutes perfectly wasted.